Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
President Donald Trump signed an executive order today to begin dismantling the Department of Education. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. While entirely shuttering the department requires an act of Congress, the president is directing the Education Secretary to take steps toward its closure. As Laura Aguirre reports, millions of teachers, families, and students are concerned about what it means for them.
My administration will take all lawful steps to shut down the department. We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible.
President Donald Trump has never minced words about his plan to dismantle the Department of Education. Today, he moved even closer to that goal by signing an executive order to that effect.
We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs.
Education Secretary Linda McMahon confirming on Fox News she's completely on board.
That was the president's mandate, this directive to me, clearly is to shut down the Department of Education, which we know we'll have to work with Congress, to get that accomplished.
The White House press secretary appeared to clarify between a total department shutdown and services reduction ahead of today's signing.
The president's executive order directed Linda McMahon to greatly minimize the agency. So when it comes to student loans and Pell Grants, those will still be run out of the Department of Education.
She also said funding for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and Title I for low-income schools would also not be impacted.
Any critical functions of the department, such as that, will remain.
There's been a wave of recent protests against the potential closing of the department, and some educators' unions feel their voices aren't being heard.
I'm just surprised that the president is not working with the teachers in classrooms throughout the country, as represented by their union, to make things better.
The executive order is expected to spark a litany of legal opposition. I'm Laura Aguirre for KPBS News.
And local educators are reacting to the move. The Department of Education provides the San Diego Unified School District with money to fund programs that help our most vulnerable students, specifically those with disabilities, low-income students, and military families. School Board Vice President Richard Barrera says California's already suffered from underfunding for years, and he says if Congress allows President Trump to completely shut down the department, it could put crucial funding for their schools in jeopardy.
It affects our ability to provide, education for all students, not simply the students that, are funded by those specific programs. So the conversation needs to be about the federal government doing more, not less, and not operating in a sort of the chaos, that we've seen over the past couple of weeks coming out of the Trump administration.
The California Teacher Association says 2,400 public K-12 educators in the state have already been laid off. Surveys consistently show the United States Postal Service is viewed favorably by a vast majority of the American public. But postal workers say the USPS is under threat by the Trump administration and the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. And KPBS reporter John Carroll is in the newsroom with more on the alarm being sounded by USPS employees. John, what can you tell us?
Well, Maya, rallies were held at post offices across the country today, including a few here in San Diego County. Unionized postal workers say the administration and its allies are attempting a hostile takeover of the Postal Service. One of those rallies was held outside the Mira Mesa post office this morning. The workers are calling on members of Congress to stand up and protect the USPS. They say the administration's actions threaten the jobs of more than 600,000 workers. They accuse the administration of trying to privatize the Postal Service, which they say would lead to higher costs and diminished service, especially to rural areas. Bob Waterhouse is president of the American Postal Workers Union San Diego Local. He says the USPS has faced attacks before, but nothing like this.
Now we're looking at an administration that does not care about rules, does not care about law, already put people in place in the courts that said that he's above the law. So he's going to come in and do whatever it is he wants. We need the people to stop him from coming in here in the first place.
A bit of an odd juxtaposition today. At the same time the rallies were going on, the Postal Service was doing a hiring event at the main post office in the Carmel Mountain area. A person there told me they were hiring for a variety of positions, but he said he couldn't speak about the seeming contradiction between potential job cuts and adding new jobs. Maya?
And John, I understand that you did try to get an answer from a post office spokesperson, so tell us about that.
Yeah, I did. A media representative emailed me the following, quote, "We are hosting the hiring fair to assist applicants to apply for needed positions within the San Diego region. These include carriers and automotive technicians." He did not answer my question as to the seeming contradiction between the two events. Meantime, the postal workers are planning another rally this Sunday at the Mira Mesa Post Office. Maya?
Thanks so much for that report, John. We appreciate it.
Tonight, we are fairly quiet and a little bit cool. Mostly clear skies out there. Temperatures falling to 49. And we will keep things kind of back and forth for the upcoming days. But there is a pattern change for us heading into early next week, which I'll be breaking down in the full forecast coming up.
Well, tourists will have to spend a little bit more to stay in America's finest city this summer. The city of San Diego is raising the hotel room tax starting May 1st. The increase to the transient occupancy tax was approved by voters as Measure C in 2020, but was challenged in court. The city expects it to generate about $82 million in fiscal year 2026. Over the next 5 years, the money will go toward convention center improvements and operations, as well as efforts to address homelessness. A new report shows Chula Vista has issued permits on thousands of high-end homes over the last few years. But KPBS South Bay reporter Corey Suzuki says the city isn't making the same kind of progress when it comes to more affordable housing.
In 2021, Chula Vista set a goal of building 11,000 new homes by the end of the decade, with more than 40% of them aimed at low-income and very low-income households. This week, a new city report found Chula Vista has already surpassed its goals for high-income housing, but is making much slower progress on more affordable homes.
I mean, it's very discouraging, right, to see the numbers.
Jose Lopez is the San Diego director of the tenants' rights group ACE.
To see that, the housing that is getting built is housing that is not for the people who actually need the housing.
City officials say it's been a tough year to find funding for affordable housing. Stacey Kurz is the city's director of housing and homelessness services.
Right now, there has been a lot of changes in that financial landscape, and so it is much more competitive right now to get funding for affordable housing.
Kurz says Chula Vista has taken some steps, including tightening its requirements for developers to include affordable units in their projects. The city has another 5 years to meet those housing goals. In Chula Vista, Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
Peace is brewing in parts of San Diego between a group whose colors are blue and another who wears red. Decades-long sworn enemies, the Crips and the Bloods, are talking. KPBS's Amitha Sharma says veterans from both gangs hope that dialogue will trump threats and badly needed resources will replace gunfire. And she joins me now. Welcome.
It's good to be with you, Maya.
So it's been common knowledge for a long time that there is this feud between the Crips and the Bloods, but why did they start talking?
The deaths, pure and simple. The sheer body count of gang murder after gang murder after gang murder left the communities and neighborhoods of Choya's View, Paradise Hills, Skyline, some of the other neighborhoods in that community traumatized. And it wasn't just the families of the victims who were affected, it was neighbors, it was entire communities. So a few years ago, a nonprofit by the name of Pillars of the Community decided to reach out to the Crips and Bloods and get them to stop the killing, and they reached out to longtime gang members first. People like Ricky Weaver, who is 62 years old. He has spent more than half of his life in prison, and he was ready for dialogue.
Because I realized that death is over. Before, I didn't care if I lived, I didn't care if I died, I didn't care, you know, I had no fear. So, you know, you just learn that death is final, it's over. Whether you're young, or older, in the middle, whatever. And you see mothers cry, so we just said, hey, we don't want no mothers to cry this summer.
Weaver is in his 60s, but active gang members are a lot younger. He convinces the younger Crips to talk to Bloods by changing his language. He says he no longer beats his chest and vows to kill the Bloods. That alone carries weight, he says, because he is one of them. He says he keeps his ear to the streets, and if violence is looming between the Crips and Bloods, he requests a one-on-one with the involved Crip and asks if there is another way. It can be a hard sell because so many of the Crips' friends have been put in the graveyard by Bloods, and vice versa. Linnell Brown, 54, is a Blood. His brother was killed by a Crip. His cousin also died in a gang attack. But he says he has transcended the hatred and revenge bred by those killings.
And my lesson is, you know what I'm saying, try to prosper and, you know, get your education, get your money right. You know what I'm saying? Just fighting people for no reason, that's for the birds. You know what I'm saying? It's for animals and savages. You know what I'm saying? We human, and we should be able to live in a society without fear of each other just because of our skin color and the clothes that we wear. There's got to be something better. It's got to be. If we want everything that Rancho Penasquitos and La Jolla got, then let's try to act like them. They're not fighting each other and killing each other.
That message may be resonating. In the 8 years before the Crips and Bloods started talking, there were 15 gang-related murders on their turf, making up 25% of gang killings across the city. Then, in 2023 and 2024, there were 0 in those same neighborhoods, but 10 across the city. SDPD Lieutenant Lou Maggi says he'd like to think part of the reason for the drop is due to several large-scale police operations targeting some of the most brutal gangs and criminals in the city that have, quote, put a lot of very violent people in jail. Still, 42-year-old Cherie Hampton, who was in a Blood-affiliated gang, says outside of the massive dip in deaths, the biggest effect of the Crips and Bloods meeting regularly is an understanding
that we're the same. We want the same things in this community. Outside, if we wasn't coming together, we would never know what they want and what we want, or when would this conversation ever come about? To be like, oh, what can we do to help the community? Who was going to do that? Who was going to start trying to build and rebuild our community? It's up to us.
They are also working to open 2 drop-in centers, one in Stockton Memorial and another in Ocean View, where people, including current and former gang members, can access career counseling, job training, childcare, and mental health services. Melissa Hernandez was a member of a gang tied to the Crips. She says the services are vital to ending the Blood-Crip violence forever.
Because there's not no broken cycle yet. It keeps going on and on and on, and I'm seeing this even with young kids. You know, I was a young one, so me being the young one, nobody was there for me, and the ones that were, they gave up too soon.
And Maya, one final and larger point that each of the 4 people you just heard talking made to me was the following, that if the Crips and Bloods can sit down and find common ground for a better future, then America can take a page from their book, can learn a lesson from them in these divided times. I think one of the women I spoke with said, you know, the Republicans and Democratic groups, they should come and sit with us and see how we're doing it. If we can do it, they can too.
Yeah, interesting parallel that we should all study. Thank you so much, Amit. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Maya.
And this story is part of our Public Matters initiative. You can learn more at kpbs.org/publicmatters.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump signs an order aimed at dismantling the Department of Education. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
San Diego is preparing to update an important document called the Street Design Manual. The goal is to prioritize safety over speed. But KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says when it comes to installing new crosswalks, not much will change.
Walk around San Diego and you'll see them everywhere. No pedestrian crossing signs. They're often at intersections where people want to cross the street, but where the city wants to discourage it. The signs can force pedestrians into long detours just to get from one side of the street to the other.
People are going to cross where it's convenient for them, and the street design should reflect where people are going to cross.
Laura Keenan founded Families for Safe Streets San Diego after her husband, Matt, was killed by a driver while he was biking in 2021. She says no-ped crossing signs are a clear example of the city prioritizing cars over pedestrians.
Pedestrians have just as much right to our streets and sidewalks as everybody else, and we want to make sure that they're staying safe.
Earlier this month, a 47-year-old man was crossing 6th Avenue from Balboa Park into Bankers Hill. An oncoming driver failed to yield and struck the man, leaving him with life-threatening injuries, including fractured bones and a severe brain bleed. He was in what's called an unmarked crosswalk. There are ramps guiding pedestrians into the street, but there's no paint or signage telling drivers to watch out.
Had there been a crosswalk there, his chances of survival would have been, or chances of getting hit would have been a lot less. Ideally, there would have been some sort of light to push where, you know, to indicate that he would be crossing, but there needs to be more broad use of crosswalks in our city.
San Diego recently released a draft update to its street design manual. It has some new guidance on how to design crosswalks, but it makes no changes to the city's policy on where to install new crosswalks. That policy has a complex point system, but it doesn't take into account if the location has a history of drivers hitting pedestrians. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
A special election to fill the vacant District 1 seat on the County Board of Supervisors is right around the corner. Residents there say the decades-long sewage crisis will be top of mind when they cast their votes. Our media partner KGTV spoke with a couple who's lived in South Bay for decades. Edward De Los Reyes and Gayleen Scarborough say they both suffer from respiratory issues. Over the years, they've seen many District 1 supervisors try and fix the problem.
I commended Brian for his efforts to stop the pollution way back in the 70s. But since that time, there's nothing but Band-Aid fixes and promises.
We would love to have had everybody over here and had an Easter egg hunt, but it already smells like rotten eggs, so we can't do it. We just can't.
And the couple adds that they feel strengthened binational cooperation between the U.S. and Mexico is non-negotiable. The special election for District 1 seat begins on April 8th, and early voting is already underway. And a reminder, you can check out the Voter Hub at kpbs.org. You can find answers to commonly asked questions, including how do I know if I live in District 1? And you can take a quiz to see how the candidates align with you on important issues. Well, spring is here, and the Carlsbad Flower Fields are blooming. But as KPBS North County reporter Alexander Wynn shows us, there's more to see there than just acres of flowers.
The rows and rows of ranunculus at the Carlsbad Flower Fields create a calliope of colors, much like an artist's palette.
It's literally living art. That's how we feel it.
Marketing manager Taylor Moss says that's part of the reason why the Flower Fields started partnering with artists 2 years ago.
We just wanted to kind of see what they could offer, how they could bring an extra experience to our guests.
It started with a local artist, Jennifer Coburn, and metal butterfly sculptures.
They actually moved with the wind, so they actually had movement, which was really nice. And then last year we had Michael Summers, a local muralist, come and paint us a mural, which was amazing.
And this year, it's Alex Haveri.
This came together magically, and I was very happy about that.
Haveri is a Tucson-based steel and glass structure artist, but she grew up in Coronado. Her exhibit is called Glass in Flight.
They're about pollinators and insects and flowers and the love of color and our planet.
And they're made from a special glass called dalle de verre, French for glass slab.
It's inch thick, and that's what makes it unusual.
And if dalle de verre looks like stained glass, that's because it was prominently used for stained glass windows in the 50s and 60s. The exhibit takes advantage of the colorful glass by playing with lights.
We placed the sculptures throughout the garden so that at different times of the day, a different sculpture would light up. And when you can see a sculpture with the sun directly shining behind it, it's a magical moment.
And that means everyone gets their own magical moment, regardless of when they visit. The flower fields are open from now until May 11th. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
The Flower Fields also donated the profits from the opening weekend to the LA Fire Relief, raising about $10,000.
As we talk about the hours to come, really it's nothing too unusual for us. We'll be a bit back and forth as we keep things dry, but the flow is weak enough where we will have basically an onshore flow at times, an offshore flow at times. It's very subtle here as far as the changes that we'll see in the upcoming days. Meanwhile, it does warm up into early next week, and for some of us, Monday will be the warm day. For others of us, Tuesday will be the warm day, but it's all as high pressure rebuilds across the southwest. Here we are. 49 for the low in the city. As you work your way towards Escondido, we're headed to 43, and Borrego Springs making it into the lower 50s overnight. Chula Vista will hit 48. Very dry setup here for your Friday. We miss out on all of the action that's been either Northern California or north of that throughout the Northwest as we've gone through the late week here. So no huge changes with anything as far as our pattern is concerned heading into tomorrow. 68 the high in the city. El Cajon coming in at 76 degrees. Oceanside 69 for you, and Mount Laguna topping out in the mid-50s there. Campo heading 70 degrees for a high. As we look at the coast, next couple of days here, really not, again, any huge changes for us. Right through the weekend, a few extra clouds maybe for the weekend, but overall fairly quiet, dry pattern. Monday, we go into the upper 60s, though, so that's kind of our warmest day of the week, and that's going to be true for some of our inland communities as well, as we hit the upper 70s for highs with plenty of sunshine out there. Really, though, the pattern then for us will, as we hold on to the 70s inland, go up into the 50s for some of those mountain communities. Sunshine, dry weather. In fact, Tuesday, our warmest day here as we top out in the lower 60s. That's when that ridge really builds, takes hold with the high pressure system setting up overhead, and there's just enough of a still setup, not as much of an onshore flow, at least for the mountains, to really have an impact here. If you're in the desert communities, 95 on Tuesday, that's going to be our warmest day, and it's kind of the gradual buildup until that point through then. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
Tonight, UC San Diego men's basketball enters March Madness. It's the team's first ever NCAA Division I tournament game. UCSD is facing Michigan in a first-round game in Denver. Oddsmakers have the Tritons as underdogs, although they're entering the tournament on a 15-game winning streak. Tip-off is at 7 o'clock. Have you ever noticed when you're driving south on Interstate 5 that something might be missing? As Ken Kramer shows us, it's a freeway mystery, unless you know this story about San Diego.
Southbound Interstate 5 want to go west to Ocean Beach. There's the sign for I-8 eastbound, got it, but wait, where's the off-ramp for I-8 westbound? You mean there isn't one? They never built one? How strange is that? We went to Caltrans, where Catherine Bruce Johnson did some research. She says if you go back a half century, Interstate 8 headed east from 5 toward Arizona, that was it.
So when it was originally designated, there was not an Interstate 8 west of I-5.
Okay, well, we wondered when they did build it west toward Ocean Beach, they didn't think anybody would want to go from South 5 to 8 west, no ramps. She says it was a question of money.
They did not build the expensive structures, and there really wasn't a need for them at the time. It was a different time in the 1960s.
And Ocean Beach was a very different place.
We were sort of not a part of San Diego. We were sort of ignored People didn't know what to do with us.
And rumors began to spread. The fact that there were no off-ramps for people, say, coming down from L.A., no signs on Interstate 5 to tell drivers how to get to Ocean Beach. Was it all an attempt to isolate OB from the rest of San Diego?
We've heard lots of stories about it. And some people thought it was because they didn't want anybody to come to Ocean Beach.
Denny Knox is executive director of the Ocean Beach Main Street Association, a group of area merchants and professionals who really get into history and are at their core OBers. She checked with all her sources, historical society, political figures. Any truth to this?
Well, we like a good conspiracy here at Ocean Beach, but that's probably not true.
Back at Caltrans, they have some metal artwork on the front gate, and guess what it depicts? That very interchange, I-5 and I-8, no ramps from South 5 to 8 West and Ocean Beach. So in the research, there's nothing to the old story, all the rumors?
I didn't come across anything like that.
But the next time you're on I-5 South, look for the non-existent ramp to 8 West. It's something that for decades has been, if not a conspiracy, at least a little curiosity about San Diego.
And the wonderful Ken Kramer has a half hour of stories every week about San Diego, which you can see on Thursday nights at 8 o'clock right here on KPBS. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On NPR's Morning Edition, an NPR investigation helped lead to 15,000 veterans being saved from losing their homes. But some in Congress want to kill the rescue program. And from the San Diego Padres to the Wave FC, KPBS Roundtable is talking sports and what to expect in the coming seasons. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.